This video is sponsored by Loot Studios. Malediction, the world's first 3D printed miniatures card game. What's it like? Is it any good? Can anyone play it? Well, let's find out. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. So as I said at the start, Malediction is the world's first 3D printed miniatures card game, and the way that they described it is it's Warhammer meets Magic the Gathering, and that's very true. Now, as a really cool dark fantasy setting, a quick abridged version is some gods made some powerful relics. They're relics they give to mortals. The mortals are like, oh, these are cool. Let's use them for good and bad. Big battles happened, kind of world-ending events. These world-ending events resulted in a tear in reality called the Malediction, and forces now fight over this area and try and claim some of these powerful relics, which imbues them with powers of gods and stuff like that. So it's quite an interesting sort of idea. The idea with the gaming side of it is you take control of these. You have a seeker, which is your leader. They have a warband, and depending on which faction you pick, I'll come to those in a moment, but you recruit these troops. Cards obviously play a big role in this game as well. Now, I will link in the description the website as well, so you can check that, because you can look at all like the background, you can look at all the different factions, and also all the shiny pretty figures, because there's a lot of pretty figures, which is the main thing about this product. Now, if you do delve into the world of Malediction, you have 4 factions to pick from, like I mentioned. Each faction has its own box set, which has all the card related content you'll need, plus the STL codes to print out all the STLs. They retail at £60, or whatever that is in dollars. At initial look, you're like, well, that's not a lot for what you get for 60 quid, but you do get all the STLs for that faction, as well as all the cards you need to play the game, as well as the stand-ins. And that's something that, for me initially, I was a bit like, oh, but I like to do stuff that's available to everybody. You know, when I do my videos, this is like open to all. But actually, if you really are into the 3D printing world, or you are getting into 3D printing, or you just like 3D printed models, I think this is a really, really good, valuable set. But I do think it's quite user-friendly, especially if you are new to 3D printing, because the actual miniatures are well supported from like the actual supports. They print really well. That is probably down to the printers as well, and the programs you use, whether that's Chitterbox, which is a program for like putting your STLs on, or Lychee. They have Lychee as a recommended one for theirs, and I had less fails with prints in this set of stuff than I have with all the other 3D printed things I've tried to print out, or have printed out. I found it was, from start to finish, it was actually much more enjoyable to print stuff out through the stuff that you get in the Malediction box sets, and you get everything for that faction. That's the other thing as well, and you can print as much as you want whenever you want, and depending on how the games go, you can bring in more troops. So you're like, I need more Crossbowmen, so I'm going to print out more Crossbowmen, or I need more of these characters, so you can just print more. Now, I do think 3D printing is the future. It's going to be around for a while, and it's going to be like one of those things where eventually every household would have one at some point. So I can see why they're moving into, like, you will need a 3D printer to play this game. You don't need it. You can play it without it. That is still something I'm gonna point out. You can still play the game without it. If you really like the game mechanic and the game system, don't let the fact that you need 3D printed models get in the way, but they are really cool models. Now, as a hobbyist who loves painting plastic toy soldiers, metal toy soldiers, there was some trepidation with doing this video, because it, like I said, you need a 3D printer. It's all 3D printed miniatures, and being new to 3D printing, I was quite nervous about what this will look like from a video point of view, but also from a quality point of view, and will I enjoy it? Is it how much work's involved? Obviously, with the printing, depending on the size of print and what printer you have, you can only print out so much stuff in one go, but whilst they're printing out, you can be painting others. So you can have like a bit of a workflow going, so you're not constantly overwhelmed by a load of models just printed out in front of you. You do it in bite size. Maybe you play with like one of the characters to start off with, and then use the card content that comes in the box to get you started, so you can get through playing the games and getting used to mechanics, and then, oh, you know what, I've worked out I need more Crossbowmen, or I need more Revenants, or whatever. I'm obviously referring to a lot of the faction that I'm now become quite a fan of. There's 4 factions, which I'll come to now, actually, I suppose. There is the Order of the Shattered Throne, which are kind of like the goodies. Maybe the goodies, maybe I'm reading it wrong. Now, as a faction, they tick all the boxes for me, because they have the vibe of all the things I like. So like knights, men-at-arms, warrior nuns, cool looking beasts being ridden by like majestic looking warriors. Everything that I like with like Stormcast, Cities of Sigma, Sisters of Battle, it kind of feels like that, and I like the look of it. And it kind of, I guess, amalgamates a lot of those things, but still being its own thing. And from a game point of view, the Order of the Shattered Throne seem to be quite good all-rounders, quite good at defensive stuff with spells and things, but also pretty good on the offense as well, from what I'm led to believe. But I wouldn't say masters of each of those things, but pretty competent in all those areas. Then you have the Primal Blood, bunch of savages and monsters and beasts. I mean, if you like barbarians and monsters, I guess that's kind of what it feels like. And from a game point of view, very aggressive. So if you like getting stuck in and hitting stuff with axes and stabbing things with spears, definitely the Primal Blood is for you. For the fans of the undead, you've got the Legion of the Fallen. So you get to field vampires, you get to field like weird and wonderful spellcasters. Very strong from a magic point of view from the game, but also you can just like raise up so much dead and just swamp your enemies with lots of like undead beasties. But as is the way with me, I like to look at models and how I can use them in other games, and if I shrink them down slightly, there's plenty of games that I like that I might find homes for some of these models as well. And that's not just this faction, that's most of the factions as well. There's like a lot of cool things you can use elsewhere, which big fan of. One thing to point out as well, they are slightly larger scale as well, so a lot of the figures around about the 40mm mark. But yeah, if you like undead, vampires, corpses, it's definitely the one for you. Then last of all, you've got the Conclave of the Spheres. So if you like your mages, you like casting spells, this is definitely the faction for you. And obviously they have a lot of spellcasters from a game point of view, as well as like from a model point of view. You also have these things called Spellbound, which are, I guess, like your thrall, kind of your rank and file for your mages, because your mages are going to stand back and like cast spells, right? So these are things that probably get stuck in, but they're really cool looking things. I guess they're taken from this area called the Malediction, which is the rent in space and time where it all went. It's kind of like, I guess, ground zero of the apocalypse of the old times where everything went wrong. And they obviously harness some of these demon beasts, nightmares and whatever, and then use them for their own devices and stuff. But they are grotesque. I will not lie. There are some grotesque things. And one of them I'm going to paint, which is proper grotesque. Really flabby skin sacks. And, you know, who doesn't like painting skin sacks and flab? Interesting opportunities for painting, I would say, with all of these factions, to be fair. So that's something to bear in mind. Like, they're all really cool. They all have their own pros and cons from like a miniature range point of view and a gaming point of view. So if you like warriors, then obviously you go for something like the Shattered Throne or the Primal Blood. But if you like spell casting, then obviously you go down the Legion of the Fallen or the Conclave of the Spheres. And I guess that's the beauty of the game. Like, once you've collected one warband, you might go, you know what, I fancy doing a bit more mage related stuff. And then, you know, so certainly if you are playing against opponents, you will see how effective those things are. So that might inspire you to have a crack at trying other factions too. But yeah, if I had one model to pick, and if anyone wants to follow my colour scheme, I guess the Crossbowman's a good example because he has all the materials and textures that all the other factions have. Like, some have more armour than others, some have less armour than others, but this guy has a little bit of everything. So if I paint him up, then I can also use him as my test model for painting the other stuff down the line as well. So I know what my metallics will look like, I know what my cloth's going to look like, and that's why I use the Crossbowman as my test model and the example I'm using in this guide. But yes, I'm now going to paint a Citadel Crossbowman, not a Crossbowman from Citadel Miniatures. That, I need to be clear about that. He's called a Citadel Crossbowman. Just wanted to check that. So first up, I'm going to start off with an undercoat of Raven Black for my Citadel Crossbowman. Now the first colour I'm going to apply is going to be deep grey, and this is going to be a dry brush. I'm going to use an old batter brush for this. You don't have to, you know, use your nice pretty dry brushes. Just get an old brush for this. This is just going to go all over the model. Now the reason why I'm doing an all over dry brush of black is because sometimes when I'm doing some painting, I know I want black leather on this guy, but I'm not sure entirely what is going to be leather, what isn't, what's going to be trousers. If I do a nice dry brush of grey over that Raven Black, I can then pick and choose during the painting process what I'm going to be using. Then after that, I'm going to get something called Tundra Taupe, and I'm just going to run this over some areas that I definitely think will be leather. So that's going to be things like the trousers and the boots, and what that's going to do is it's going to give that black a little bit more of a worn and dirty kind of look. So I'm just going to go over and do that. Then I'm going to begin base coating any red details. So if this is going to use some Basilisk red, and I want its tunic to be red, so I'm going to have to do a couple of coats here because I always like to thin it down a little bit. I don't want it too thick and goopy from the pot. So I'm just going to go around and pick out all the robes or tunic with a little bit of that red, getting some of those nooks and crannies. Now, one thing you do experience when doing 3D printing is sometimes you have little noblets of the supports that are left over, so I tend to just, even after spraying, I'll notice them just hiding there. So I just quickly got rid of that with a knife and carried on painting after. I've moved to a smaller brush here as well because there's some more accurate bits that I need to be a bit more mindful of. So initially I was using a slightly larger brush, whereas now I've gone for something a little bit more fine detail, just for some of those areas that are a little bit hard to get to. And then it's just a matter of applying a second coat. Again, didn't even spot those bits to start off with, but I thought I'd just knock them off and continue on my base coating journey. All part and parcel. Sometimes you get a little bit model blind and you don't notice them when you're spraying them, or you don't notice them on the first coat, or you just refuse to notice them. Sometimes that's the case. Then after the red, I'm going to get some true brass and I paint up all the armor. So that's going to be things like the helmet, as well as like the breastplate, shoulder pauldrons, and any other little bits of armor here and there. Again, just work your way around, take your time. And again, you might want to jump between like a large brush or a small brush, depending on the areas, depending on how hard they are to get to. I am trying to be mindful as well, not to try and get some of this on those straps, because I want them to be black, and I've done that dry brush. Again, use a smaller brush if you feel you're not confident to use a bigger brush. Entirely up to you. Oh, can't forget his chin guards as well. Like I said, there's a few areas to pick, things like the chin guards, and of course he's got like a little bit of armor on his van brace as well. Then I'm going to get some silver. I'm going to pick out all the buckles and any other silver details. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing buckles. You can just go around and find the metal bits like I'm doing here, or just paint the entire thing like silver and either leave it, or later on when we add some black, we can pick out that leather bit in the middle. It's entirely up to you. But yeah, I'm just going to go around, pick out all those silver details with some plate mail metal. I didn't realise there is actually quite a lot of buckles on this guy. He has, I think, the world's allocation of buckles. Now, because I was being lazy and I didn't want to get like a paint out and paint all the brown bits brown, I've got some dark wood, which is a speed paint. And what I'm going to do, because I've done some dry brushes and it's like an off black, it's actually going to work really well with this dark wood colour. So I'm just going to paint all the bits like the wood and any other leather details with that, work my way around, and as it dries, it will give it a bit of a brown effect. Now on the boots here, originally I was just going to do those folded down bits, because you often see like black boots with like some nice brown bits around the top, but I thought, no, just going to do the whole boot brown. Actually, I preferred that. Thought it looked a bit too, there was too much black basically in the end. So I thought, yeah, pick it all out in brown. Same for like the scabbard, and also his quarrel for his crossbow bolts as well. But it just helps break up the shape and the amount of black and brown on the model. Then what little bit of skin there is, I'll just pick that out with some Paratrooper tan. Again, just be mindful not to splodge too much on the model. It's probably not going to get much, probably just a wash and that's it. And any mistakes you might have made, I'm just now going to go around and tidy those up. So any like bits of metal on the helmet or anywhere that I might have got a bit of red or metallic on the black areas, just going to go around with some matte black and just tidy those up. Again, it's not going to be like an end of the world situation, just like the odd little splodge here and there. And if you have like made a big splodge, again, just paint over it. It's not the end of the world. Also here, I'm just going to pick out the little centers of those belt buckles with a little dollop of black as well. And then it's just a matter of coating the model in a shade of your choice. Here I'm using some strong tone, just going to go all over. It's just my way of working. Usually I'm quite heavy with it, and as I work my brush around, it tends to get quite frothy, so you see a lot of bubbles. That's fine because they do settle down to being wash again, so don't let that concern you. But I normally start off with a large brush first, and then as I'm working my way around, I've moved to a slightly smaller brush just for a little bit more accurate detail, or just to remove some wash that's kind of deep in an area and the big brush is just not doing the job for me. So yeah, that's all I'm doing there. And on the armor, I just added a little bit more wash here and there where I thought it could do with just a little bit more definition. Now after it's dry, you can leave your model at that, or you can do one highlight, which is what I'm doing here. I'm getting something called Castle Grey, and I'm just going to do a dry brush of that all over. I'm going to get it on some of the metals, which I'm not going to be so fussed about. But this is a really quick and efficient way of just doing an all over highlight, and then you can leave your models at that. You don't have to go mad. And because it's like a warm kind of grey bone kind of tone, it works quite well with all those colours on there. And it's just, like I said, it's just a one size fits all kind of way of highlighting a model. An old classic eye painting technique, that is. But if you do find you've been heavy-handed or it's just not working with some areas, you can go back over, like here on the boots and the leathers. I'm just getting some of that dark wood. It's slightly thinned down, it's not straight from the part. And any highlights that may have been a bit too much, it's just going to knock them back slightly. You'll still see the highlights through. It's just not going to be as in your face as it was when I initially did the dry brush all over. But again, you can decide that how you wish. But if you do want to do some next steps and do some edge highlighting or whatever, that's what I'm going to cover now. I'm going to use the same model and just go over those areas I've dry brushed. Normally you wouldn't do that with your models, but I'm just using that for example. So I'm going to get some Wyvern Fury and I'm just going to pick out those raised bits. Actually, the dry brush has done me a lot of legwork here because I know what the raised bits are now. So you wouldn't normally do that. It works quite well for this situation anyway. So I'm just going to go around, pick out like folds of cloth with a lighter red. I'm going to go around the sleeves and the tunic. I'm also going to do the scarf as well. So everything that's red basically is just getting a highlight of Wyvern Fury on those folds. And then after that, for a final highlight on the red, I'm going to get something called Blood Chalice, which is a little bit lighter. I'm just going to be a little bit more selective about where that goes, just like on the odd raised area where the light might catch it. So I'm not going to like edge highlight everything, just little bits here and there. I'm also doing my little jaggedy highlights here in places as well, because that actually makes it look a little bit rough and torn as well. Now I could have done the trim a different colour, but I just thought it'd be quite nice just to kind of almost layer that trim with a lighter red, just so it looks like it's a slightly different material, or it's just a little bit of ribbon or edging on the actual tunic itself. But then also use that same highlight just to do some scratchy bits on the folds, just make it look a little bit torn. Like I say, the jaggedy highlights don't have to like be super neat, you can just like tap it along. I also forgot to pick out some silver bits on the actual crossbow, so I'm just going to do that now. I'm not really bothered about washing those. In fact, it just looks quite nice just with those little bits of silver punching out here and there. And then any other metallics that need tidying up, so like the true brass, I'm just going to go over some of those areas of the armour where it could just do a little bit more bling or a little bit more love. Maybe it's been a little bit washed out by maybe the dry brush or the wash, whatever. Just add a little bit of bling here and there. Again, picking out those raised bits where the light's going to catch, deeper recesses in the shadow. No one's going to notice. Just work your way around, take your time. Sometimes after some of the shading and highlighting, I like to bridge the gap a little bit more by getting some black or dark brown and just dropping a deep recess shade in those areas, or just like getting a bit of black or brown, like I said, and dropping them in. And then I'm just going to go over and highlight some of those little bits of leather. Certainly, like if it's not been picked up by the dry brush, or it just needs a little bit more punch, or you want to make it look a little bit more torn or scuffed. And then I'm using some of that dark wood on the actual helm as well, because again, I just want to make it look a little more aged, a little bit more grimy and dirty, and adds a little bit more emphasis as well to some of those nice details on the armor. Again, sometimes the shade doesn't always pick it out, but that's fine, because doing those little bits of recess shading here and there does the trick for you. Again, it's not necessary, but it just adds a little bit of extra punch to those colours. And then I'm just going to go over the base with a dry brush. So I'm going to use deep grey like I started off with. I'm going to do that quite heavily on the flagstones. I'm going to do this for all my bases. So this is how I'm going to base everything really. Then I'm going to follow that up with some Grey Castle, just for a little bit more punch. Again, add a little bit of warmth to those flagstones. And just be mindful not to get on his feet if I can. And then I'm just going to get some olive drab, or any kind of green really, if you want to. Hey, get back here, you. I'm just going to drop that in all the cracks and the recesses of the flagstones. But there'll be some bits on the raised areas. That's fine. I'm just going to wipe that off with my finger. It's just the old Peachy finger rubbing technique there. And then if you do need a little bit more here and there, if there's like a flagstone missing, or it just needs a little bit more green, get some neat green, drop that into those cracks as well if you want to.
Well, he was a lot of fun to paint, and it was quite nice painting something a little bit larger than I normally paint as well. So like I said, these guys are like 40 mil, something around about that kind of size. They're a little bit larger than your normal average heroic scale figures. And it was quite nice. There's a lot of belt buckles on this dude. I will say there was a lot of belt buckles. And in the guide, I showed there's a couple of different ways of doing it. You can either pick out all the metal bits or just paint it as silver. But yeah, showing like a couple of little ways of like doing the quick and dirty dry brush all over, or if you want to add more steps, doing those extra highlights. Regardless of which way you pick, I now have a test model for my Order of the Shattered Throne, and I can't wait to see what the rest look like. But what I'm going to do now is move on to a more sinister looking figure, a disciple of Anush-Vah, I believe that they are known as. Looks like me. He's a baldy, looks like me. Now, he's from the undead faction, and they are kind of like, normally I paint undeads in like blacks and reds and purples, a bit like the other dude I've just done. But I thought I'm going to go a little bit different and make him in like whites and greys, but make him look a little bit dirty. Go like really pale kind of colours, but look like they could have been good as at one point. That's the plan. So yes, let's paint a disciple of Anush-Vah. So first up with this disciple, I'm going to get some Holy White, which is probably not the most aptly named paint to use for this guy, but I'm going to apply that all over the white areas. And what that's going to do is just add a little bit of like a greyness to that white, but I'm actually going to make it a little bit more grey later on anyway. But I'm just going to go all over using a large brush here and a slightly smaller brush there, just to make sure it's all on those recesses. That's the great thing about speed paints and contrast. You can just swamp them in and they do a lot of the legwork for you. Then I'm going to get a nice bone colour, whatever bone you want to use. I'm going to paint the candles and the skulls at the same time, because I can apply a wash later on to differentiate one from the other. So I'm just going to go around picking anything that's like a bone kind of colour, or like a, I guess, a tallow wax candle in some form of cream or bone, whatever, a bone tone. Then I'm going to pick out the skin. I'm going to use amber skin here. So this is quite a pale kind of skin tone, which is great because I don't want him to be like too healthy looking. So I'm just going to go over base coating all the flesh areas. So that's mostly just his torso, parts of his arms that are exposed from the wrappings, and of course that peachy face. Look at that. It looks like me. But yeah, just work your way around, do a couple of coats. Don't forget his fingers. There might be some parts here which are exposed skin or the wrong kind of wrappings or whatever, but just paint what feels right and what looks right. Don't forget his toes as well. Then any metal areas, again, some areas may not have been metal, like this girdle thing here, that could have been cloth, but I wanted to pick out as metal. It helps break up the shape a bit as well. So I'm just going to go around and picking out all those details I want to be like some kind of brass or whatever. So make one. He's got like some nice shin guards as well, so I'm going to pick those out too. And then there's a chain linking a few bits, so I thought I'd pick those out with some silver. Again, these are colours I've used already with the Crossbowman, so I'm just going to reuse those again. And then I'm going to coat all over with a shade. Now, I like using shades. I do it all the time, certainly from an army painting point of view. And this is no exception, even though he's a character. And what it's going to do is also darken down that white robe, if you like, and make it look a little bit more grimy. And of course, getting a smaller brush and then just moving some of that shade around a little bit and soaking it from other areas where it's pulled a little bit too much. Again, always doing a little bit of wash here and there because wash has a habit of flowing down. Then I'm going to get some ash grey. I'm just going to do a nice little soft dry brush over anything that's going to be white or like that off grey kind of colour. And that's one way of highlighting this model. So it's a really quick and easy way. You can do it over the bone as well. Alternatively, you could just do some edge highlights with that ash grey instead, if you didn't want to do dry brushing, if that's not your bag. So that's what I'm going to do here, is just get some of that ash grey and then use that as my highlight. So just picking out some of the raised areas here and there on the cloth. Again, not going too mad, just areas, again, like I've said numerous times, where the light will catch. You can do the jaggedy little highlights that I like to do because this guy is quite grimy and it's an old soiled looking, maybe burial robe, I don't know. But yeah, you don't have to be like super neat about this dude. Well, you can do. There's no right or wrong way. Really like the arm wrappings as well, so I made sure I'm picking out some bits here and there. Again, just catching the bits where the light's touching. Then for an extra highlight, I'm going to get some company grey, and I'm just going to pick out selectively a few little bits here and there. Again, some of these could be jaggedy highlights to make it look torn, or you can just do them nice, smooth, crisp highlights, whichever floats your boat. But it's really going to help make it look like it probably was white or a like kind of like grey at one point, but now it's just a little bit grimy, a little bit dirty, a little bit soiled from living in graves and coffins. Because that's what I like to do in the evenings. I like to chill out, put my old grey robes on and lie in a coffin. Hopefully a coffin that's already occupied. I like to cuddle up at night with the dead. Then I'm going to get some amber skin again and tidy up some of that flesh. Again, not going mad, just picking out bits that could either do with a little bit more punch or a little bit more love. But I kind of like the way that the skin looks a little bit, I don't know, it's just not very nice. It's very sickly looking, very pallid. So yeah, just pick out the bits where you feel it's needed. Obviously the face is important, so I'm just going to concentrate on some of the extremities there. Cheeks, nose, eyebrows, ears, that big bold head. Got to pick out the big bold head, make it look a little bit shiny. This is solar panel though, isn't it? So it keeps him nice and energized. Then I'm going to get some soft tone. I'm going to go over anything that's skull related to start off with. So all those bits of bone and skull I picked out earlier, they're going to get a little bit of soft tone. I'm also going to do it over that true brass as well. Kind of adds a nice tone to that metallic as well. But yeah, I'm just going to leave the candles as they were before. So doing the shade on the skull and then leaving the candle with the previous shade kind of makes them look like two different materials. You just work your way around, pick out any other areas. I'm also going to do it over the silver as well, because actually once that shade was on it, I kind of like the idea of it being a bit rusty and dirty. Now here I'm going to use my first paint from the John Blanche Masterclass set. This is Grim Dark Shadow. It's kind of like a really dark, dirty, icky green, and it's perfect because I want this guy to look dark and icky and like his clothes are a little bit soiled in places. And I get a dry brush and just stipple some of that wash off. Helps blend it with the cloth, so it's looking a little bit dark at the very base of the cloth, but where I've like just rubbed it off here and there in the middle, it kind of gives it a nice blend. And then just on that cowl at the top there, I'm going to do the same thing, just drop some in the recesses where it needs it, around the back. Also doing an odd little dot here and there is quite nice as well, because it just looks like some horrible stains and stuff, which is perfect for your undead guy that lives in crypts and coffins. Again, at the base of that cowl, do the same thing I did on the robes at the bottom. Then I'm going to add some red around those eyes. Now I used Basilisk Red earlier. I'm just going to thin this down a little bit, drop those into the eyes a little bit. Then I'm just going to get my brush, wipe it off, and then just move some of that red around. So I don't want it too red. I just want to give the subtle effect of red, so it adds a little bit more of a pinkiness to that area, because too red might look a bit much. And also do the same thing on his lips as well. And then just go back over some amber skin where I might have like splodged a little bit here and there, maybe on the brows or got a bit too much on the cheeks and stuff. But yeah, just added a little bit more warmth into those sockets, his eye sockets. And then, yeah, pick out those nipples. Why not? Pick out the nipples and some of those deeper recesses. I quite like the effect. Add a little bit of warmth in places, so that's why I've done it a bit more on the torso and whatever. And again, that was a journey discovery. I was like, yeah, I quite like it around the eyes. I'm just going to add it in some other places. Yep, time to highlight those nipples and his lats and ribs, whatever. Again, don't forget like picking out extremities. And there we are, pretty much done.
So Evil Peach is now done. Really, really pleased with the look of this guy. Although the 3D printing from my side was quite questionable because I'm still learning. Really pleased with it. Yes, there's a few bobbles here and there. And that's something, I guess, from a noob, if you want to say, or someone that's still quite new to painting 3D printing miniatures. It's like anything. If you're painting a plastic figure, and I do this, I get model blind. Sometimes you just don't notice a model line until the end. It's the same with like the little support bobbles and stuff like that. Every now and again I'll be like, oh, there's another one of those, slice that off, and that could be during the painting process, that could still be in the cleanup process, whichever. So yes, there was a few bit bobbles here and there, and I did break one of the little trails on his robes, and that's just one of those things. But he's a 3D printed model, and I could always print another one out, and it's not going to cost me that much because it's going to be pennies in comparison from the resin point of view. So I'm happy with him, and if I want a second one, I'll print another one out. Now, when I was filming this video, House Peach did get hit by the plague, and it did impact my workflow. I did have grandiose plans to do more stuff, but I thought what I'm going to do is to represent the plague and to pay homage to it, and I paint one of these weird looking Spellbound beasts. Now, don't ask me to pronounce it because it is just a load of guttural words, but I want to say something like Bahig'udjin. Let me have a look. Let me have a look at how I've written it, because it's really Bahig'udjin. Bahig'udjin. Meat sack. That's what it is. It's a meat sack. I'm going to paint one of those. But what I'm also going to do is, at the time as well of making this video, the John Blanche Masterclass from Army Painter got announced, or there was a hack and they decided to do like a little response video, and I'm allowed to use them. So I am going to use a couple of the washes in this. I'll do a bigger video at another time that's dedicated to using the John Blanche paints, but I thought I'll use a couple of them because there's some really nice washes, some grimy looking dirty washes that will be perfect for this meat sack. So yes, I will feature a couple of the John Blanche paints in this guide as well, which are mega, by the way, really nice. Now, to begin this meat sack monstrosity, I'm going to start with a dry brush of Barbarian Flesh. I'm doing this over an undercoat of Peachy Peach because, well, why not? It's a mega looking flesh spray. I'm just going to do that all around, and it's just going to pick out those rays. It's quite a heavy dry brush to start off with, so that's really good. That's going to almost like base coat and layer, but still leave that Peachy Peach in the recesses. Then I'm going to get some amber skin, which is a slightly lighter colour, and I'm just going to do that a little bit more, less pressure on the dry brushing. So it's just picking out the some of the raised areas here and there. And again, any textures like those like lines that are cut into the skin, it's going to help add a little bit of definition to those as well. And then I'm just going to finish off a little bit of opal skin. And what that's going to do is add a almost like real pale pallid flesh tone to the very extremities. Again, this is a really, really light dry brush, so it's almost a tickle. Then I'm going to grab myself another John Blanche Masterclass paint. This is Blood Moon Red. It's a really nice red, and it just looks really soft. Now I'm using a large brush here because what I want to do is drop it into those cracks of the actual, whatever those markings are. But also on the edges, it's going to make the, if it's like a wound maybe, look a little bit sore, a little bit, well, not well healed and stuff like that. And any other areas I want to do around the helmet and stuff, I'm going to pick those out too. But yeah, initially that's the plan, is just I'm going to quite heavily apply it to those lines, cuts, joins, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, just make your way around, find all those little areas that I've got those cuts or lines on them. Some really disturbing areas to paint on this model, I won't lie. I was disturbed. I'll pick a little bit around the feet as well, make it look a little bit sore, or just blend it in. Now, to make those wounds look a little bit less blurry or bold, I'm just going to get some water and I'm just going to apply that on those areas because the speed paint hasn't fully cured at this point. And I'm just going to apply it a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is wipe my finger and it will just remove some of that
broad red wash that's on those areas. I just thought I'd apply some of that grimdark shadow here, not because, oh, it's going to go in the recesses and add a little bit of darkness, but also I really wanted to know what was skin and what wasn't, because in some places it's quite hard to tell. So I thought if I just do a wash over it, it's going to give me a little bit of a barrier, and also I can add some of that grime around the helmet joint anyway, and also around the feet and any other like folds of skin, because it's a grimy, horrid colour. Very unwashed looking colour, which is perfect for this model. In fact, these John Blanche paints feel like they have a home with this guy. Then I'm going to get that opal skin again and just do a little bit of dry brush. What that's going to do is just help pick out some of those areas that may have been a bit obscured by a bit of wash or whatever. Just add a little bit more definition. Again, it's a super light dry brush. Like I said before, just a little tickle. Alternatively, you can get a brush and do it by hand. So just go around, find some of those flappy folds of skin and highlight them up, or just do some jaggedy highlights around some of those lines and wounds and whatever. Or just lay it back over if areas look a little bit, well, just splodged. Then I'm going to get some true brass. Now that I know what is going to be helmet and what is going to be flesh, I'm just going to go over what that helm thing is. I guess this is the thing that binds them to the spells maybe. But yeah, I'm just going to coat over. I think I only need one coat really. It's a good solid metallic to coat over anyway. And then I'm going to get that grimdark shadow and I'm going to apply that. It's quite heavy to start off with. I mean, initially I did probably pull too much on there at one point, but that's fine because I can work that into the actual armor and also join it in with the flesh a little bit as well, just to make it a little bit more manky. I like using the term manky. So yeah, just run it around, mix it in with the flesh a little bit if you want to. But yeah, it's just going to add all the definition to that helmet. Also, I thought I'd add a little bit more to the base of the feet as well to make them look a little bit dirty as well. This thing is not, it's gross. It's gross. Like, it's got dirty belly button, it's got dirty feet, it's got dirty folds of skin. You don't want it to be pretty. You want it to be gross. And these paints are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me. Some of those markings I thought could do a little bit more of that red, so I just drop in a little bit here and there. Just a few choicey applications, nothing too intense. And again, if you do find you want to like wipe your finger over areas, or you want to get a brush and just soak some excess off if you've gone a bit too mad, by all means do that. And around that helm I thought I'd add a little bit more red as well, so maybe it's a bit sore, a bit irritated. And because some of that shade, that green was still a bit wet, it kind of worked quite nice that this red mixed in with that and just made it, added to the mank. That's the best way to describe it. It really helped add to the mank. And again, wipe my finger for some quick, easy highlights. But yeah, really pleased with this guy. He looks horrid, and I hate getting this far down that part of the body. It's not nice. Now, I can't tell you how disturbing it was painting this Spellbound monstrosity, but it was also a whole ton of fun as well. I quite liked running grimy colours into its folds of its skin, and then using that blood moon red, which kind of reminds me a little bit of the bloodletter glaze that Citadel used to do years ago. It kind of had the same kind of feel to that, but it was really nice just making the skin look a little bit sore as well. And the other thing as well, regardless of the scale, this scheme for this Spellbound guy would scale quite well with like the sort of larger Spellbound creatures, and I guess some of the Primal blood stuff as well, because you've got like some big monsters. So what I've done here can fulfill a lot of different meat or skin exposed beasties in the Malediction range. So yes, but yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed painting this guy. Yes. So I was initially a bit concerned about how I'd pitch this video, because like I said at the start, I kind of try and cover subjects that all people can access, and with it being a 3D printed exclusive kind of game, it isn't really. And I think it is a really nice sort of avenue for those starting their 3D printing journey as well. I think it's a really good game system. It's a really nice way of introducing 3D printing, and the model quality is really good. But also I had more fun printing these things as well. With some of the other stuff I printed, it's been a little bit of a headache trying to get settings right, sorting out supports. The supports are already sorted and they're just a dream. And again, some of that is obviously the fixes I've made from a 3D printing point of view, like adding more heat to my 3D printer. Whereas that was the issue I had in the previous video, was just the environment was a bit colder. But yeah, it definitely, like the steps of like just like downloading the Lychee program to then place these on so it fits onto my 3D printing plate was pretty straightforward. Then taking that information, sticking it into my printer, printing those out. Obviously there's going to be like some road bumps when I am doing some printing. I had a couple of failed prints, but that's kind of normal. That might just be down to like the actual
printer itself or just what I'm doing wrong, as opposed to it being anything to do with the models from Loot Studios. There's nothing to do with that. It's definitely a user error thing. But yeah, from a price point of view, I still think it's super reasonable, with it being 60 quid, whatever that is in dollars or whatever currency you use. You get everything you need, all the card content, all the STLs, and that, I guess as well, like if you like subscribe to patrons, you are subscribing a certain amount, you're getting different amounts each month, and some STLs are quite expensive. Going to like different companies that supply STLs, you pay quite a bit of money for one STL. So actually 60 quid, which includes the entirety of that faction, and you get all the card content, I think it's a pretty good deal. And like I said, I guess it's lightweight enough as well, with it all being card. From a shipping point of view, the cost of that is lessened on the manufacturer as well as the customer as well. So that's another benefit. But yeah, Malediction, I think it's a really interesting concept. I can't wait to see where it goes and what more stuff gets added to it. I've got lots of things still to print. I'm just at the start of my Malediction Order of the Shattered Throne warband creation, I guess. So I've still got lots of things to print, lots of things to paint. And like I said, I will use a lot of these things for other game systems as well. And I think that's the beauty of it. If you end up getting the STLs and you are printing stuff out, you can use this for all sorts of stuff. Obviously, it's designed for this game system. I will obviously make that clear, because, you know, it's Loot Studios like, this is our new game. It is, yeah, these are for this. But you know, I like to like look at ways of like incorporating figures into other game systems as well. And they do mention that, you know, these are perfect for D&D. If you've got like a cool D&D group, there's so many things that you can use, like all the different characters you've got, all the different like rank and file troops. They're just really cool NPC characters for D&D games. So there's so much mileage with the stuff on this set, not just for the Malediction game itself. The end cards that you get, I will link a video as well, because Loot Studios do like a bunch of videos about the game and how to play and how the rules work. All their team that do that, really talented. So they talk about the rules a lot better than I ever could, and how the game system works. So do go and check those out if you are interested in the game as well. Also got the links down in the description for getting to the website and whatever. And as always, a big thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you found something useful, whether that's from a painting point of view, maybe a hack or two here and there, or just some cool colour schemes to get you started on your own road to painting models from the Malediction box sets. Or maybe this is going to be the game that pushes you over the edge to maybe get a 3D printer and print out some amazing figures. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed it. Put your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think. And I can't go without saying goodbye to these beautiful people. Thank you, as always, to my patrons for being an amazing, supportive community. Whether that is just keeping me G'd up, making me feel better when I'm feeling a little bit poorly, a little bit under the weather, maybe when I've got the plague. Regardless, you're all amazing human beings, and I'm indebted to you for your support. Right, I'm now going to go and try and pronounce that Spellbound multiple times. I don't know how to say it. If anyone in the comments knows how to say it, please say it. You can go onto the website and check it and go, yeah, Peachy, it's obviously Bahig'udjin. Bahig'udjin. It just sounds like some kind of weird Irish whiskey. Maybe it is. I don't know. Let me know. Bye.